What's up, everybody? Rob here. So, starting in 1095, Christian Europe engaged in a series of military campaigns aimed at restoring the Holy Land to Christian control. Some of these were wildly successful, some of them were not so successful, and some of them were so badly planned and ineptly executed they could barely even be considered crusades at all. I'm going to be talking about one of these. Specifically, I'm going to be talking about the Children's Crusade of 1212. All right, let's get down to it. So we got to go back in time a bit here to 1187. Saladin had just captured Jerusalem, and as a response, Europe launches what later became known as the Third Crusade. Now, this is probably the most famous of the Crusades. It featured such luminaries as Richard the Lionheart, King Philip II of France, and Frederick Barbarossa of the Holy Roman Empire, all of whom had the ultimate objective of retaking Jerusalem. All of them failed. Actually, Barbarossa never even made it to the Holy Land. He died on the way. And Philip and Richard spent so much time bickering amongst each other, they ultimately failed at their great objective. However, Europe was still in a crusader spirit, and eventually, a couple years later, they launched the Fourth Crusade. But due to circumstances I'm not going to get into here, they kind of got, sidetracked. Well, I'll be generous and say sidetracked, and they ended up sacking Constantinople instead. Yeah, things are not looking good. Still, the Crusader movement was still under full steam, and many throughout Europe wanted to reclaim the Holy Land from the infidel. However, the upper echelons of society, the nobility and such, they were kind of dragging their feet, and the lower classes really wanted to, reclaim the Holy Land. There was a great deal of religious zeal throughout society at this point, and they figured they'd take matters into their own hands. And motivation, specifically in this case, came from two very unlikely sources. Now, it's very hard to separate truth from myth and legend, so I'm not even going to bother. I'm just going to be telling the story, and you can make up whatever it is you wish to make up from this. So anyway, in the spring of 1212, a shepherd boy in France by the name of Stephen of Cloyes claimed that Christ appeared to him in a vision and handed him a letter, ordering him to go on crusade, gathering an army of followers to join him as he went along. He, along his journey, would gather up followers preaching his message, and this crusader army ended up in the court of King Philip II of France, the same guy who went on the Third Crusade, and to whom Stephen presented the letter that Christ gave him. Now, in response to this, Philip thanked him and sent him on his way. Philip obviously was, not very enthusiastic. He had already been on the Crusader path, and it didn't really work out so well, so he really wasn't in no mood to do so. And really, the matter just sort of dropped right there. The contents of this letter and the letter itself, of course, have been lost to history. We have no idea what's inside of it. However, it is speculated that it was an exhortation, apparently from Christ himself, for Philip to take up the cross again. Of course, he never actually did. Now, around the same time in Germany, another young boy by the name of Nicholas of Cologne was preaching a very similar message. Now, which one started first and which one influenced the other is unknown. But anyway, Nicholas, just like Philip did, made his way throughout the countryside and throughout, Germany. I know it wasn't Germany at the time. I know it was Holy Roman Empire. You know what I mean. In any case, he eventually started moving southwards towards Italy and the Mediterranean coast. Along the way, he picked up another army of youths, and as one chronicler put it, many thousands of boys ranging in age from 6 years to full maturity left the plows or carts they were driving, the flocks which they were pasturing, and anything else they were doing. This they did despite the wishes of their parents, relatives, and friends who sought to make them draw back. Suddenly one ran after another to take the cross. Thus, by groups of 20, 50, or 100, they put up banners and began the journey to Jerusalem. End quote. Now, the sources get a little bit muddled here. Some of the sources claim that Stephen and Nicholas joined together, and some say they did not, and that Nicholas was actually running the show at this point, and Stephen had actually gone off back home. In any event, it really doesn't matter. They all moved south towards the Mediterranean coast. And I just want to point out that there's actually a large multitude of people in the army, not just young men, or young boys, like children, but also old men, women, children, basically the lower orders of society. And basically it was a massive force, roughly 20 to 30,000 strong, according to some sources. However, many of them actually turned back when they finally reached the Alps. Now, the Alps were hard enough for Hannibal when he tried to invade, and he was a professional military leader with an organized military force, not a bunch of ragtag youths and cast-offs of society. So a lot of them just turned back. A large number actually died in the Alps, apparently. And well, yeah, things were not crossing the Alps is difficult under the best of circumstances, and the best of circumstances, these were not. In any case, their ultimate destination, at this point at least, was Genoa in Italy, although some did make it to Pisa, also in Italy, and some made it to Marseille in France, and some other ports along the Mediterranean. They crossed the Alps and actually arrived in Genoa in August of 1212. Now, accounts differ as to what exactly they expected to happen here. Some said that the Mediterranean Sea would part, like the Red Sea did for Moses and the Israelites, and they would just, walk to Jerusalem. Others, the more cynical or pragmatic of them, I guess you can say, thought that Genoese merchants and other merchants along the coast would ferry them to the Holy Land, completely, of course, out of the goodness of their hearts, Christian zeal and all that. Now, like I said before, this was about 20 to 30,000. This force was about 20 to 30,000 strong, but instead of using military force, they would actually use diplomacy and convince the Muslims to convert to Christianity as a show of faith rather than, swords and spears and such. As you can imagine, it never really got that far. Now, merchants, of course, maybe they were good Christians, maybe they're not, but they do have businesses to run, and they're not going to risk their ships ferrying a bunch of kids across the storm-racked Mediterranean without actually getting paid for it. What was left of this army, if you could even call it that point, most of them packed up and actually left for home. And that was pretty much it. However, according to some sources, some of these individuals were not so fortunate. Many of them were taken aboard the ships by treacherous captains who, hoping to make a quick buck, did actually cross the Mediterranean to Muslim-held lands where they were sold in slavery, particularly in Egypt. Some made it as far away as Baghdad, and so they made it to the Holy Land. They made it to where they wanted to go, just not necessarily in the way that they intended. There is also a legend that Nicholas of Cologne and a sizable portion of the army actually got fed up with what was happening in Genoa, and they packed up and they headed further south into Italy, where they made it to Rome, where they had a meeting with Pope Innocent III. Once there, they had an audience with the Pope, and Innocent praised the children for their zeal and their Christian faith, but then released them from their crusader vows. At this point, any momentum that was left in the army has evaporated. Stephen of Cloyes disappeared from history well before this, and so did Nicholas. However, there are some legends that say that Nicholas eventually became a Teutonic Knight. However, this is unconfirmed. So, what to make of all this? Well, the Children's Crusade, like I stated earlier, did not consist only of children, but also of the lower orders of society. Now, actually, it's possible that a very large majority of the individuals in this army, these 20 to 30,000 person force, were actually adults or, fully mature individuals, and that the Children's Crusade moniker comes from accounts which refers to the army either as infantes or puerti, which I'm sure I'm mispronouncing. I'm very sorry to French and Italian speakers. I just insulted two languages at once. It's what I do. In any case, these words do mean child. That is absolutely true. But it also could mean, in this context here, and especially in the context of the time, a powerless individual, somebody like of a lower order of society. See, at this point, crusades had been taken on by the nobles, kings, obviously Richard and Philip, and of course an emperor, Frederick Barbarossa, higher orders of society, knights, and even non-nobles, but upper levels like yeomen, farmers, and craftsmen, stuff like that. This was not really those people who had, some stake in society, even the non-nobles, like the upper class, I guess you can say middle class yeoman types, but rather this was an army of wandering poor and the downtrodden. So rather than calling it the Children's Crusade, probably a better way to describe it would be a crusade of the downtrodden. So was it the zeal of the children of society? Well, probably not. Now, was it led potentially by children, Stephen and Nicholas? Yes, they were somewhere, depending on the sources, anywhere between like 14, 15 years old. So, yeah, but they got the ball rolling, but it was mostly joined by these lower orders. And I just also want to point out, it has been speculated that the accounts of the Crusade members being sold into slavery probably did not happen. It is possible that it happened, yes. However, there's really a lot of secondhand sources, and I heard it from a guy who heard it from a guy that heard that this happened, but it was possible that this was actually a morality tale. See, there was actually nothing official about this at all. Actual crusades, the First Crusade, Second, Third, Fourth, etc., they had official papal backing and hopefully consisted of well-trained and equipped members of the upper orders who actually, knew how to conduct military operations, not a bunch of, cast-offs of society and the downtrodden that really had no idea what they were doing. Zeal is good, but, chainmail and swords are a little bit better in these sorts of things. In any case, as they did not have papal approval, the church put out these tales of these children, we'll just assume that they were children here, getting sold off into slavery as a way to dissuade people from just taking things upon themselves, and that if you want to go on crusade, do it through official channels. So they just really want to reinforce the point that if you step out of the bounds and crusade outside of papal approval, there will be dire consequences for your actions. So that's it, just a real quick video here. I just thought it was an interesting thing I'd talk about. In any case, please hit the like and subscribe button. More videos will be coming out whenever I get around to it. Have a good day. Or don't have a good day. You're an adult. Have any kind of day you want. See you later.